You are listening to episode 46 of Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. A little bit of a change to the intro that we normally do. Just trying to change my phrasing a little bit to make it more interesting for your ear holes. I'm here with my brother-in-law and co-host Sam. Sam, how are you on this Monday night?
I'm doing very well. How are you? How was Ren Fair?
Ren Fair for the second weekend was amazing. I was able to see Jacques the Whipper, who you may know from... He's pretty countrywide at this point. He goes to a whole bunch of different fairs, and he was telling us a little bit about himself today. He was like a news anchor, weatherman for like a local news station, and then he quit his job and became a Ren Fair actor? Talent? I don't know. Performer? That's probably the better term. Performer. So he travels the country, he does shows with his whips, and it's kind of like a comedy show. It's pretty good. I followed him on TikTok, so it was really cool to be able to see him in person. And I'm excited to go again next week for the third and final weekend of Washington Midsummer Renaissance Fair and see him probably one more time. Did you do anything fun over the weekend?
Oh, yeah. We went up to where your aunt lives, spent a very lovely weekend there, hanging out with folks, celebrating your mother's birthday. And it was a lot of driving, but scenic route, and really nice to see my daughter and her cousin, so both your niece and nephew, spend some quality time together, hit some milestones when it comes to various things, some rolling over and some standing and all sorts of fun stuff. So it was a very nice weekend full of family time, not much nerdy happening.
First cousin fight too, right?
Well, so my daughter did make, I guess,
finger contact with his eye.
There might have been a poke in the eye of her cousin that prompted a cry. But then toward the end of the week, that was Friday night. And then toward the end of the weekend, there was a lot more peaceful cohabitation of the carpet.
Yeah, I mean, the older one's got a stake or claim, so I'm all for it. I will be egging on this feud throughout their entire lives, so be prepared, Sam.
All right, well, I will keep her in tip-top shape, ready to compete at all times.
You want to talk about the episode?
Yeah, we should talk about episode 7 of season 3 of The Witcher. Sean, you have a episode recap here, and then we'll jump right into our discussion. I don't think... Yeah. Let me prognosticate and say this might be a shorter episode since we had most of the screen time focused on just one plot.
Yeah, and I don't really have a whole lot of negative to say. So, spoiler alert for the description episode summary that I'm about to read. But to me, this is one of the most faithful book adaptations we've had with this show. And if you read the book, it's pretty straightforward with what we have in the show. And Sam, you're going to have some disagreements with what the writers chose to do. But then again...
does the Pope shit in the woods?
Yep. Well, probably not since like the 300s, 400s.
I don't know. This Pope seems like does he like hiking?
Not anymore. He's at the hospital all the time.
Oh, poor guy. Okay. Yeah. Well, this is now...
He probably did at one point, but...
Pope Watch this 2023.
Oh, God. Yeah. Here we are.
Okay.
Episode 7.
Take it away.
Out of the fire, into the frying pan. Already, can I just say...
Is that the title?
That's the title of the episode. Can I just say another terrible episode name? We had last week, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face. And then this week, out of the fire, into the frying pan. It's giving me Peter Jackson Hobbit vibes.
Well, I mean, that's the title of a chapter of The Hobbit.
Yeah, I know.
Well, hold on. Let me see. Yeah, everybody has a plan till they get punched in the face, out of the fire, into the frying pan. So I guess it's a switcheroo, right? Because the phrase is out of the frying pan into the fire.
They've reversed it, but but they're pretty much using the same phrase, so we'll
Oh,
just leave it at
they're
that.
they're just so clever, aren't they?
And
Oh, they're just so cute.
and
Okay.
here's the summary. At Aretuza, Jaskier finds and confronts Radovid about his attempt to capture Ciri for Redania, and the two part ways. Jaskier also reunites with Yennefer, who informs him that Ciri is missing. In Brokilon, Dryads, led by Queen Ethne, take care of the wounded Geralt. Teleported through a portal at Tor Lara, Ciri finds herself in the wasteland of the Korath Desert. Struggling to find water or food, she is encountered by a unicorn she names Little Horse, who keeps her company. Wandering the desert for days, Ciri is tormented by visions of her loved ones and a mysterious figure revealed to be Falca, a half-elven princess burnt at the stake for her crimes. When an unnamed desert monster attacks Ciri and wounds Little Horse, Ciri is persuaded by the vision of Falca to use dangerous fire magic to heal the unicorn. As she does, a violent, fiery vision nearly consumes her before she relinquishes her magic and loses consciousness. Waking up surrounded by bounty hunters. Oh, that was. What terrible. This is why I could never be a voice actor, because I just ignore grammar. That was a comma, not a period. So let me just rephrase that. Before she relinquishes her magic and loses consciousness, waking up surrounded by bounty hunters. Jaskier visits Brokilon and finds out the forest has become a refuge for people escaping the war between the northern kingdoms and Nilfgaard. As he finds a slowly recovering Geralt, he informs him of rumors about Ciri being on her way to Nilfgaard. Like I said before, I just fumbled through that summary. This is a pretty accurate series of chapters, but a section of the book, this is a pretty accurate depiction of what happens. It's mostly Ciri in this episode, so I could imagine this is going to be a pretty short discussion between you and I. It's kind of sandwiched with the beginning portion of Jaskier and like the fallout of Aretuza. We learned that this explosion happened at Tor Lara, Ciri's missing, Vilgefortz is missing, and then it's bookended with kind of the big news that Ciri is apparently heading to Nilfgaard, which is in the books as well. This is for me pretty faithful. What do you think? Was this faithful?
I mean, the big parts of it are faithful. I think in the execution there are some differences, and some of those are just in the manner of portrayal, and some are a little bit deeper than that. But I had a middling reaction to this episode. From my positives are this one was incredible. I think especially the desert scene at night, the desert landscapes and vistas, and even that the very first scene of Ciri falling through the portal. Did you catch that? How like the sky opened up, and that was really cool. That visually, that was great. But then there were kind of little bits and pieces, and I don't know how you want to kind of structure our reaction to it, that just struck me as didn't quite land as they intended it to land, or I don't know what they were going for here.
Well, let's get the fluff out of the way first. So the beginning and end.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk outside the desert first.
It seems like Radovid was there for part of the confrontation or the battle, which seemingly we saw all of in the prior episode, because that episode ended with all of the mages being out, or seemingly all the surviving mages being outside of Aretuza. So that just, I didn't understand kind of why you needed another confrontation between Radovid and Jaskier, which actually I thought it ended on a more positive note, because Jaskier was offering to help Radovid kind of escape and get back to where he needs to go, which is a little bit different from where we leave off here. But yeah, I think it makes sense though, because now we have Jaskier going through the aftermath of what Radovid has done. And he was really involved with like this destruction of Aretuza. And you see all the dead bodies. He ends up learning that Ciri's gone. Geralt's really hurt.
So I think at this point he's kind of just like, you know what? Yeah, fuck you, man. Like, you're really
I,
shitty human for
I
trying to do all of this for your own personal benefit, and then look what it's gotten you. And Radovid is also kind of shaken up when he realizes the consequences of his actions.
Yeah, what I would have wanted from Radovid there was a little bit more explaining to Jaskier and the audience what his role was in this whole scheme, because he was
But
never
I think that was obvious though.
not to. Okay, so this is me just maybe being a little bit denser. He wasn't there during any of the fighting. He seemingly it was his job to steal
Get
Ciri
Ciri, yeah.
under Jaskier's nose, which didn't necessitate him ever being at Aretuza. Once Ciri went to Aretuza, he's not a fighter. Seemingly he is. I mean, he said something about like I came to find my guards or whatnot, which he earlier in the season he references kind of leaving his guards, but that could have easily been a lie. So we don't. I still don't totally understand how in the loop Radovid was or responsible, as opposed to taking orders from his brother or from Philippa or whatever else. So all of the ambiguity around Radovid's true role in everything and just the actor's portrayal is it's sending me mixed signals, which if that's the effect that they're going for, fine. And I guess we will wait till the conclusion of this season for like the final verdict on Radovid. But that to me,
that's just where we differ because I think it's pretty clear to me.
Sure.
I left this episode going, oh yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, I mean, who won, right? Like who won the battle?
I think that's the point. Nobody did. The Redanians didn't get Ciri. The Brotherhood had like half of their people wiped out, and then they have to rebuild from the ashes of a destructed Aretuza. The Scoia'tael didn't win because they had a bunch of losses and then never got Ciri, and then kind of leave with their proverbial tail between their legs.
Their square tail between their legs.
Ciri is forced to like escape the situation.
Okay, so that was the other thing.
I think the whole point is like everybody just fucking loses.
Yeah, I mean, this is where I could have used a scene with Radovid being a little bit more introspective and like being like, oh, we were so close to this, and maybe having a moment with a dead Redanian soldier or something like that, and you could easily have set him up as somebody that Radovid had a relationship with since Radovid was a kid, and then the soldier died in the confrontation, so you can see the toll that it took on Radovid. But then if it turns out he's this mastermind pulling all these strings, you have this great reveal that like this dude can act, right? He can manipulate whatever else. It's not that we don't know that, but it would further that characterization. The other thing that was confusing to me in this first scene is that Radovid talks about Tor Lara and talks about Ciri, but we have no way of why should the audience know that or believe that Radovid saw Ciri run into the tower? Like that seems to be common knowledge for people who were not there. I think Radovid mentions it, and then Geralt mentions it as well. Like Geralt was fighting Vilgefortz and was knocked out, and Ciri was running. He didn't know that she ran into Tor Lara, just that she was running toward Aretuza. Anyway, again, these are.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the exact like sequence of events, so I don't remember it being a problem. To me, I just chalked it up to word was beginning to spread amongst all of the survivors of the battle.
Yeah.
Oh, Ciri's missing, and she was last seen going to Aretuza or Tor Lara.
It's Yennefer who says that in the scene following Jaskier with Radovid when they run into each other. I was like, we saw Yennefer and the rest of the mages observe Tor Lara exploding, but we never saw Yennefer recognize that Ciri ran into it. And then she mentions how she was going through all the rubble, which when did that happen? We didn't. It's like there's this has been a frequent thing where the writers have characters say that they were doing something, but they easily could have just shown like that scene could have taken place at the ruins of Tor Lara, and it would have been much more impactful, and there would have been far fewer questions begged. Anyway, that's.
Yeah, I'm gonna say you're nitpicking on this one for me.
Right.
That's fine. It's really easy for me to at least. This show has made it Carly hates when I say Just suspend disbelief. This show has done a very, very poor job of helping me do that. But I'll say in the last like 2 episodes, I was very easily able to suspend disbelief and just go with the flow. Like, especially with that whole sequence. Yennefer says that somebody saw her running into Torlara before it exploded. She says that she was digging through the rubble. I mean, that all tracks for me. So I'm not too held up by it.
I think to me, the thing is, it's just so easy to not have little continuity errors about who was where and who saw what. You've only got 8 episodes. It's not the most complicated thing in the world to be like, okay, this is where Yen was when we last met with her. What would make sense for her to do? Like, what does she know? What does she not know? And I think the real issue for me is that I would forgive an odd cause and effect or continuity thing here and there, but it just comes on the back of all of the other mistakes that the writers have made with the adaptation, with the characterization. And then in this episode, I'll get to it, which is just the straight up dialogue, where I'm getting really tired of all the vulgarity. And I get that there's some of that in the book, but it's done better and differently. And here it's like sometimes all we have is vulgarity, especially some of those scenes with Ciri in the desert. Anyway, I will continue to overlook the glaring yet small errors in continuity and causality to move on to the next batch of criticisms. Do you want to go to the end, the bookend here?
Let's just go straight to the end because it doesn't have any impact on the whole meat of the episode. So we end with Geralt and Brokilon kind of being healed by the Dryads, and Jaskier shows up. We can assume he probably walked or rode a horse. We don't know. But actually, no, because he doesn't have a horse when he gets there. So he walked for sure all the way to Brokilon, which we don't know where that is in regards to Aretuza. So we don't know how long it took him.
But real quick, we do get a bit of geography in this episode.
Do we really?
Yeah, we don't get a map or anything like that. We have Ciri figuring out where she is, referencing directions and geographic locations that have, I will say, not been established prior to now. And then we have, in Jaskier's conversation with Radovid, he's talking about, it's relatively small, but he mentions a few locations, including Oxenford, which I think canonically is not too far away. I don't think it's too far away from Aretuza, so that would make sense. But yeah, still no sense of the distances between Brokilon and any of these other places.
Yeah. So Jaskier shows up and basically tells Geralt that he has heard that Ciri is on her way to Nilfgaard. And that is pretty much the whole subplot of the books. And this is kind of where it breaks off. Now, the books for the rest of the series talk about Ciri's story and then talk about Geralt. Geralt is always under the belief, because of this rumor that Jaskier tells him, that Ciri is in Nilfgaard. Now, it is what it is. It's faithful to the books. What do you think about the ending?
So, I mean, I don't mind the whole setting up Ciri in Nilfgaard plotline. And I think I know where they're going with the girl who was brainwashed to think she is Ciri, because there is a fake Ciri in the books who is in Nilfgaard. The thing that really got me in that scene is when, before talking about Ciri, which you think would be the lead, Jaskier talks about the war, and he talks about how he saw a village outside of Roggeveen and they killed everybody. I think he's talking about Nilfgaard, and then he talks about how they're looking for Ciri, and he's crying. It's very blubbery. And then in the immediate next sentence after that, he talks about how Ciri's in Nilfgaard and they've announced a wedding. And so it's one of those things where you again reference a massive invasion and we don't see it. That was also mentioned in Radovid's conversation with Jaskier at the beginning of this episode. But we don't see the invasion. We don't see Jaskier moving through a war-torn landscape. We don't see any of the aftermath of this massacre at this village. And then it doesn't make any sense that in the seemingly Nilfgaard would both be looking for Ciri by killing everybody, and then also parallel to that, announcing that that Ciri is going to be marrying the Emperor. So it was just this like weird juxtaposition of pieces of information, and I didn't really like Joey Batty's delivery of the crying scene. It drew me out of it. There we go. That's my reaction. Oh, and then as we're talking about Brokilon, two comments here, and they might both be nitpicks, but I did not like the portrayal or the performance given by the actress who plays Milva, and I don't like what they've done with how they portray the dryads. I think some of it is they give them this like weird primitive look, not like visually look, the way that their faces, their expressions, and the way that they move their faces and orient their heads. It reminds me of like a Disney talking animal movie where the animals are speaking English, but they still kind of move their heads in like this weird way.
The queen also looks deformed, like she has like Last of Us fungal stuff going on.
Yes, like a weird like crown, and her ear is changing, which I don't know how much of that is like true to the.
But she wasn't like that in season 1.
Correct.
When they showed her. So
yes.
It's like why make the choice to change their appearance? That's the thing that took me out of it. When I finally saw the queen again, and I was like, what the hell did they do to her?
Yeah, it was like a weird combination of a Star Trek, Klingon, The Last of Us, which is great, and then just like throw on some random fake moss that you get at like the Halloween store or something like that. Okay, and then the final thing with Brokilon is that when you have the scene with Milva, who they don't introduce, but that is
very,
Milva.
Very poorly done.
Yeah, Jaskier is talking to her as if she is a dryad, because he keeps saying "you" as in the dryads of Brokilon Forest, and then he mentions how they are giving refuge to people who've been displaced by the war, but that immediately follows a shot of Dara, the elf, who we have seen in this season to be fighting with the Scoia'tael. And so it was just this clash between, wait, are you giving refuge to the Scoia'tael, which is aligned with the book, or are you giving refuge to human people displaced by the war? And we don't get any interaction we don't see anybody other than Dara, who we know to be an elf and we know to be a member of the Scoia'tael. And that is aligned with the book. So it's just one of those things where it's confusing. I would say borderline unnecessary and irrelevant, because you could if we get a season 4, this season 4 is the like moving through a war-torn landscape book. And so that would be where it would be appropriate to start seeing more of these things, like whatever Jaskier observed in this village.
Okay. We've done the buns of our story. Now let's talk about
let's get this hot dog.
I was going to go with a hamburger reference, but hot dog is grosser, I guess.
Well, the hot dog is made out of that weird desert monster, so there you go.
Yeah. So
or horse balls.
The majority of this episode follows Ciri. Ciri, who teleports herself to a desert, and she's kind of by herself, just hallucinating, eating lizards and throwing up, eating eggs, finding a unicorn.
She has a vision quest.
Yeah, all of this is from the books. And I really no negative notes because they kind of followed it pretty closely. You have a note on the use of Falca.
Yes.
And before we say the reference to Falca, you convinced me that I did have a negative on this sequence.
Okay.
The use of Calanthe again, the grandmother of Ciri. She dies in the first season. In the second season, we get these Ciri flashbacks when she's possessed by Valathmir, where Calanthe makes appearances again. And now in the third season, when Ciri is hallucinating in the desert, she again has visions of Calanthe being mean to her. So I just feel like they're really beating a dead horse. Sorry, Kentucky Derby. At what point are they going to stop using the same trope over and over again of, oh, we need to have her grandmother yell at her again. Oh, let's have her trip balls and get yelled at by Calanthe yet again.
That was maybe my least. That was where there was kind of a low point of this episode, and the Calanthe vision was definitely a part of it. You opened up this podcast by saying how this episode was the most faithful to the books, and that is true primarily from the perspective of the things that we see in the episode are the things that happen in this part of the book. What is missing from this episode, which was present in the book to good effect, was setting up these various things. So Falca, who we meet in this episode for the first time, there's extensive dialogue between Falca and Ciri. Falca, the character of Falca, or the vision of Falca, is drawing these parallels to Ciri, telling her to do these various things. But what we don't have is effectively setting up who Falca is and why she's important. We have one other reference to Falca in this season, and that is Stregobor saying Falca's waiting for you when he's about to fight the Squayatail at Aretuza. Prior to, yeah, burn them alive. Prior to that, again, Stregobor in season 2 discussed Falca as a way to kind of turn people's opinion against Yennefer. And then, Sean, you thought in season 1, Stregobor also references Falca, maybe in the Renfrey episode.
Yes, it's ringing a bell, and we haven't watched season 1 in months now.
Yeah.
But I thought I remember him referencing at that point as well.
Yeah. And so the thing that, again, the issue for me is Ciri doesn't know who Falca is. Why in this extreme scenario when she's fighting for her life, she sees a vision of her mother and a vision of her grandmother, people who she is very close to. Maybe there's, some trauma there with the grandmother, obviously trauma with losing the mother and all that. But who is Falca to Ciri? Or are we supposed to believe that this is some sort of spirit, some sort of, Falca from another dimension or whatever, which I don't think that's the case. And again, I'm not trying to rewrite the show, but it would be so easy to set up throughout the course of this season. Ciri is reading a book about Falca and mentions her from at point to point, and then flashing forward to, and this is mild spoilers, I don't know if it's in this season, I haven't watched the final episode, but it's definitely in the book, where Ciri joins a gang called the Rats, and she adopts the name Falca as her nom de guerre, her sobriquet. And so that's going to happen. I'm assuming that's going to happen either in this season or in the next season. And it's going to be, okay, so you're naming yourself after the person that you had a brief interaction with in the desert, who you kind of rejected at the end of it all. And there's no like depth to the Falca parallel. So that was my issue. And then real quick on the unicorn, it just comes out of nowhere. There's no setup for what the unicorn is or what it does. In the book, they go out of their way to say the unicorn appears to virgins in like certain special moments or something like that. It's the tiniest little throwaway thing, and it's kind of important to the book because it sets up the sexual maturity of Ciri. And I don't think they want to go there here, but it's just, again, you just have a random unicorn showing up out of nowhere in the desert.
I'm almost positive in this season they mentioned something about unicorns and virgins.
They might, but
it's a throwaway, but I'm almost positive that they do. So down goes your nitpick.
I mean, fine, but here's the thing. We are watching the show to react to it, to criticize it, to praise it. We're watching most episodes twice. I don't recall that.
Yeah, I do. And I'll say, even in the books, when the unicorn shows up, I remember that also being very out of the blue for me, where I was like, the fuck is this unicorn doing?
Oh,
it made no sense to me at the time.
I think it was, I mean, one of the things I love about the Witcher book series is that the chapters are usually prefaced with some sort of extract from a metafictional encyclopedia or something like that,
or book series.
Yeah, and the Encyclopedia Maxima Mundi or whatever it is, and one of the chapters in the Time of Contempt had a discussion about unicorns, And I was like, okay, they're setting something up. And then it paid off, which is great. Setup and payoff is a foundational part of any, any writing any piece of fiction. And here you get the payoff of a unicorn, but you got none of the setup. And so at the end of the day, okay, cool, there's a unicorn, it helps her, she saves it, that's a fun moment, but you don't get any of the fun of it being a payoff. It's just a thing that happens. Again, if you're saying that there was a unicorn reference earlier in this season, that's okay. I don't remember it. It obviously didn't make an impact, and that means it probably could have been done better, and they could have had it happen in this episode. It could have been a reminiscence or something like that.
I also have a disagreement on your
Falca?
Ciri taking the name Falca as a member of the Rats, only because we have Ciri at this moment is still, she hasn't given in to the darker side yet. And I feel like the rejection of Falca in the desert is who she was. And then the things she experiences with the rats and her taking her first life and all of the negative stuff that comes with what she's about to do. She only takes the name Falca after she kills her first human. So I think it's kind of like a reference to her changing mental state, what she's willing and able to do, and how she's changing as a person. So I think to me, that's what it is. And I'm less hung up on like the change, rejecting Falca and then taking her name. Because to me, it makes sense that she would do that because she's changing into someone who's more Falca-like.
Okay, so I'm having a negative reaction to something that hasn't happened yet. And so when we have that moment and there can be more of a transformation for her, it might ring more true.
Because at the moment, all she's done is rejected Falca.
True. And I don't recall in the books, but is Falca there when she's using the fire to heal the unicorn? Is it done as it was portrayed?
I believe Falca's there, yeah.
Okay. And
or at least the vision of Falca.
Okay. And the thing is, I don't recall her rejecting the seeming, I don't recall the vision as being as interactive as it was portrayed. I'm going to need to go back and reread that portion. It seemed like it was kind of a rejection of Falca and what Falca was saying that she wanted for Ciri. Yes, Ciri rejected the power, but the power was the thing that Falca was like driving her toward. And so it seemed to be a little bit more no to her.
Yeah, and she ends up rejecting magic in general. So she loses her ability to her connection to chaos is gone after this confrontation.
Well, I think nonetheless, I would have wanted more of I'm sorry, just during this episode, there were so many times I was like, oh, this could have been a moment for her. And the thing that was really funny is this strange thing of everybody else was talking about how Geralt and Ciri and Yennefer were this family. And I think when I say everybody else, it's primarily Jaskier. He said, I'm looking for my family, which he's referring to Yennefer, Geralt, and Ciri, which is weird. And then he talks about Geralt looking for his daughter. And they say he's like doing these things. And then you contrast that with when Ciri is in the desert, like very briefly, she talks like she's trying to talk to the medallion to communicate with Yennefer or Geralt. But then she's throughout the entire rest of the time, I think she's just talking about everybody other than Geralt and Yennefer. She's talking to Pavetta. She's talking to Calanthe. She's talking to Falca. She's referencing things that Vesemir and Cohen taught her, but there's no vision of Yennefer or vision of Geralt or anything like that. And it would have been this great opportunity to remind the audience of that familial relationship or the quasi-familial relationship. Like when she was like that ointment that she used, was that something that Yennefer gave to her?
Yeah, I believe it was like makeup.
Makeup? Okay, yeah. Okay, so that would have been an opportunity, again, if you're having these like dream sequences and hallucinations, have something that reminds us of the proto-mother figure that you have this close relationship with. Now, I don't think they did a good job in the show of establishing that and showing that effectively, but they at least could have made an attempt here.
I mean, for me, every episode, I'm just going to say, cramming a whole book into 8 episodes will lend itself to many problems. And this whole season for me is if you would have made this season 16 episodes, I feel like you would be able to have the time to be able to do all of these things that we're talking about.
For sure. Yeah.
Develop relationships, not rush things. Things would be able to make way more sense. Decisions characters make. You would have time to like build all of this up. But instead, we have a 50-minute episode. We got to do all of this Ciri shit in one episode. And to me, that's just the whole problem of this show from, well, not season 1, seasons 2 and 3. Because season 1, somehow they were able to do it pretty well. And like we've said in the past, the books only get longer. So it's going to be more and more difficult to fit all of the things they need to fit into the show to make it make sense. Now, I really want to talk to somebody who's never read the books to see what they think about the show. Well, and maybe you and I just hate the series because we have read the books and know how much sense it's supposed to make. So maybe towards the end of this, in a couple of weeks, we try to find someone who's watched the show, never read the books, and just ask them questions.
Well, does Carly fall into that category?
Yes, but she's too biased now. She knows all of my complaints because while we're watching, I will say things. So I don't know if she can count.
Haley is getting pretty salty, and she doesn't fall into the category of never having never read the books. She's
never reading them.
No, she's never reading them. That is for sure. She has listened to the audiobooks along with me. And she also follows a podcast and is there when I'm watching the episodes at least one of the times. Her quote from this episode, which she's said a couple times this season, is, "This is so fucking boring." And then her other observation, which is that Jaskier is ugly. She, specifically the shoulder length straightened hair, which looks limp, and then the very closely cropped beard on Joey Batty. Joey Batty is an attractive guy, but his hair and makeup is detracting from his appearance instead of accentuating it.
It's giving me strange Harry Potter Goblet of Fire hair choices. Where for some reason Harry and Ron both have really long hair in that movie for some reason.
Yes.
And then for the 5th movie, they definitely change it back. So we'll see if they change Jaskier's hair for season 4 if we get season 4. But no, I definitely thought his hair choice was a little weird. And just darker, like ever since it became like quote unquote the Sandpiper, he's kind of like adopted the black eyeliner or darker eyeliner and looking more gothic.
Speaking of,
who knows?
Jaskier, do you remember earlier in the season where he had a really fun relationship with Vespula?
Yeah.
Really great. Never seeing that character again. Anyway. I mean,
not going back to Oxenford anytime soon, I don't think.
Were they even in Oxenford? They never established where they were.
I don't think we know.
We don't know. Okay.
I'm assuming that's where they were.
So earlier in almost every single episode, including this one, I've mentioned the writers and how how
much you hate them.
It's not hate. It's frustration. It's just I kind of, they are lazy. I'm gonna say that I get the feeling that they are lazy from watching the show.
I feel like if I was a therapist and there was like a couples
meeting, I'd be like, I feel.
Come on,
statements. Yes.
Rephrase. Less you.
I feel that they are lazy, and this is why.
Sorry.
So many of their little lines of dialogue or their scenes remind me of other and better media. This episode had several instances of this. At one point, I think it's Falca says blood and fire, which is, again, talking about flipping phrases around like the title of this episode. Fire and blood are the words of House Targaryen from A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones universe. And when you're talking about a princess with a penchant for fire, and you say Blood and Fire, I'm instantly thinking of Daenerys Targaryen, and I'm thinking of a much better show, even in its later seasons. There's also reference to, again, with the Falca conversation, I think she refers to her father as a spoke in the wheel, and then references breaking the wheel, which is word for word something that Daenerys Targaryen said. I think it was, Lannister, Stark, Targaryen, they're all spokes in a wheel that crushes the little people. I'm going to break the wheel. Word for word, almost word for word. At one point, Ciri says, I don't want it, in reference to fire magic or magic in general. That was something that it became a meme of Jon Snow saying over and over again in the final season. And then a couple other maybe lesser known things that are maybe more top of mind for me. At one point, Ciri says, I relinquish my power, or I relinquish my powers, which is almost exactly a line from Wonder Woman 1984, where she has to give up her wish in order to regain her power. She has to relinquish her wish in order to gain her powers. And then Steve Trevor's soul leaves that poor man who he was possessing and endangering. And then finally, the scene where Jaskier enters Brokilon, where the Dryads won't let him in, despite, I think in the book it's established like they sent for him, or he was sent for and specifically given permission to enter. Here he has to sing in order to be allowed in, which is pretty much exactly what happens in a movie called The Mission, starring Robert De Niro. Have you ever seen this?
I have not.
Oh my God, it's great. Robert De Niro is a conquistador, and I can't remember if he's Spanish or Portuguese, and what I don't know the Portuguese equivalent of a conquistador.
Hey, you guys gonna let me into this? You gonna let me into this forest, huh?
That's pretty good, Robert De Niro.
Thank you.
Anyway, and so he is like, he kills his brother-in-law or something like that, and has to join a religious order, I think the Jesuits, in order to make penance for it. And he goes out to this mission in the Amazon, and a variety of things happen, and eventually he has to give up all of his weapons and armor, and then at the end of the movie he has to pick them up again to defend the mission against attack from other colonists. But anyway, at some point in that movie, a priest plays a flute in order to gain the trust of the natives, and it's exactly what happened in this episode. It's just little things of, it's not in the books. I don't think it's in the books. You don't need to do it. You could do it differently, but you just steal from a movie from the early 90s.
Yeah, they were ringing too many similar bells for you.
Yeah, they're just not original. I mean, and I get it, you're adapting a book, but then you're not adapting a book, and the things that you do different from the book are stolen from other stuff.
And there you have it, everybody. Season 3, episode 7, Out of the Fire into the Frying Pan, which was also stolen from Tolkien. And that's it for us.
John, why don't you wrap us up why don't you sign off as Robert De Niro?
No, I can't do that.
Okay.
Nobody wants to hear it. But you can follow us on Facebook, Elves, Rings, and Nerdy Things. You can send us an email at elvesringsnerdythings@gmail.com. We have one more, End the Misery Now, one more episode of Witcher Season 3 to get through. And then...
I'm sorry, then we can wrap it up. There was a scene where I think it was the first scene with Geralt and Brokilon, was like, don't waste your time talking to them about, like, is he basically saying, like, let me die? I was like, yeah. He's like talking to the audience right now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
We're very close to coming up with a different topic, and then we'll just go from there. Maybe we'll do a little Tolkien, get back to our roots, talk about something that we both really like after we've talked about something we dislike for so long. But we'll figure it out.
Yeah. And if there are things that we're missing, if there are some positives to The Witcher that we're not appreciating enough, let us know. If there are some additional nitpicks that I didn't catch, let us know.
If you didn't read the books and love the show, reach out to us. We would like to talk to you if you'd be willing to come onto the show.
And if your name is Henry Cavill and you just want to vent
as Robert De Niro,
but yeah, give us your best Robert De Niro impression, and maybe we'll find some time to put you on the episode. That's it, though. That's all I got.
All right, bye, everybody.
Bye.